and welcome to another installment of Imagine Your Story. Today I'm going to be reading The Glass Coffin. This is an interesting story. I found it to be extremely odd, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy my remix afterwards. Let no one ever say that a poor tailor cannot do great things with high honors. All that is needed is that he should go to the right smithy, and what is of most consequence, that he should have good luck. A civil, adroit tailor's apprentice once went out traveling and came into a great forest, and as he did not know the way, he lost himself. Night fell, and nothing was left for him to do but to seek a bed in painful solitude. He might certainly have found a good bed on the soft moss, but the fear of the wild beasts let him have no rest there, and at last he was forced to make up his mind to spend the night in a tree. He sought out a high oak, climbed up to the top of it, and thanked God that he had his goose with him, for otherwise the wind which blew over the top of the tree would have carried him away. After he had spent some hours in the darkness, not without fear and trembling, he saw a very short distance the glimmer of light, and as he thought that a human habitation might be there, where he would be better off than on the branches of a tree, he got carefully down and went towards the light. It guided him to a small hut that was woven together of reeds and rushes. He knocked boldly. The door opened, and by the light which came forth, he saw a little hoary old man who wore a coat made of bits of colored stuff sewn together. "Who are you, and what do you want?" asked the man in a grumbling voice. "I am a poor tailor," he answered, "whom night has surprised here in the wilderness, and I earnestly beg you to take me into your hut until morning." "Go away," replied the old man in a surly voice. "I will have nothing to do with renegades. Seek for yourself a shelter elsewhere." After these words, he was about to slip into his hut again, but the tailor held him so tightly by the corner of his coat and pleaded so piteously that the old man, who was not so ill-natured as he wished to appear, was at last softened, and took him into the hut with him, where he gave him something to eat, and then pointed out to him a very good bed in the corner. The weary tailor needed no rocking, but slept sweetly till morning, but even then would not have thought of getting up if it had not been aroused by a great noise. A violent sound of screaming and roaring forced its way through the thin walls of the hut. The tailor, full of unwonted courage, jumped up, put his clothes on in haste, and hurried out. Then, close by the hut, he saw a great black bull and a beautiful stag, which were just preparing for a violent struggle. They rushed at each other with such extreme rage that the ground shook with their trampling, and the air resounded with their cries. For a long time it was uncertain which of the two would gain victory. At length the stag thrust his horns into his adversary's body, whereupon the bull fell to the earth with a terrific roar, and was thoroughly dispatched by a few strokes from the stag. The tailor, who had watched the fight with astonishment, was still standing there, motionless, when the stag, in full career, bounded to him, and before he could escape, caught him up on his great horns. He had not much time to collect his thoughts, for it went in a swift race over stock and stone, mountain and valley, wood and meadow. He held with both hands to the top of the horns, and resigned himself to his fate. It seemed, however, to him just as if he was flying away. At length the stag stopped in front of a wall of rock, and gently let the tailor down. The tailor, more dead than alive, required a longer time than that to come to himself. When he had in some degree recovered, the stag, which had remained standing by him, pushed its horns with such force against a door, which was in the rock, that it sprang open. Flames of fire shot forth, after which allowed a great smoke, which hid the stag from his sight. The tailor did not know what to do, or whether to run, in order to get out of this desert and back to human beings again. Whilst he was standing there undecided, a voice sounded out of the rock, which cried to him, "Enter without fear. No evil shall befall you thee." He hesitated, but driven by a mysterious force, he obeyed the voice and went through the iron door into a large, spacious hall, whose ceiling, walls, and floor were made of shining, polished square stones, on each of which were cut letters, which were unknown to him. He looked at everything, full of admiration, and was on the point of going out again, when once more heard the voice which said to him, "Step on the stone which lies in the middle of the hall, and great good fortune awaits thee." His courage has already grown so great that he obeyed the order. The stone began to give way under his feet and sank slowly down into the depths. When it was once more firm and the tailor looked around, he found himself in a hall, which in size resembled the former. Here, however, there was more to look at and to admire. Hollow places were cut in the walls, in which stood vases of transparent glass, which were filled with colored spirit or with a bluish vapor. On the floor of the hall, two great glass chests stood opposite to each other, which at once excited his curiosity. When he went to one of them, he saw inside it a handsome structure, like a castle, surrounded by farm buildings, stables and barns, and a quantity of other good things. Everything was small, but exceedingly carefully and delicately made, and seemed to be cut out by a dexterous hand with a great exactitude. He might not have turned away his eyes from the consideration of this rarity for some time, if the voice had not once more made itself heard. It ordered him to turn around and look at the glass chest, which was standing opposite. How his admiration increased when he saw therein a maiden of the greatest beauty. She lay as if asleep, and was wrapped in her long, fair hair as in a precious mantle. Her eyes were closely shut, but the brightness of her complexion and a ribbon which her breathing moved to and fro left no doubt that she was alive. The tailor was looking at the beauty with beating heart when she suddenly opened her eyes and started up at the sight of him in joyful terror. "Just heaven!" she cried. "My deliverance is at hand. Quick, quick, help me out of my prison. If thou pushest back the bolt of this glass coffin, then I shall be free." The tailor obeyed without delay, and she immediately raised up the glass lid, came out, and hastened into the corner of the hall, where she covered herself with a large cloak. Then she seated herself on a stone, ordered the young man to come to her, and after she had imprinted a friendly kiss on his lips, she said, "My long desired deliverer, kind heaven has guided thee to me, and put an end to my sorrows. On the self same day when they end, shall thy happiness begin. Thou art the husband chosen for me by heaven, and shalt pass thy life in unbroken joy, loved by me, and rich to overflowing in every earthly possession. Seat thyself and listen to the story of my life. I am the daughter of a rich count. My parents died when I was still in my tender youth, and recommended me in their last will to my older brother, by whom I was brought up. We loved each other so tenderly, and were so alike in way of thinking and our inclinations, that we both embraced the resolution never to marry, but to stay together to the end of our lives. In our house there was no lack of company. Neighbors and friends visited us often, and we showed the greatest hospitality to everyone. So it came to pass one evening that a stranger came riding to our castle. and under pretext of not being able to get on to the next place, begged for shelter for the night. We granted his request with ready courtesy, and he entertained us in the most agreeable manner during supper, by conversation intermingled with stories. My brother liked the stranger so much that he begged him to spend a couple days with us, to which, after some hesitation, he consented. We did not rise from the table until late in the night. The stranger was shown to a room, and I hastened, as I was tired, to lay my limbs in my soft bed. Hardly had I slept for a short time when the sound of faint and delightful music woke me. As I could not conceive from whence it came, I wanted to summon my waiting maid, who slept in the next room, but to my astonishment, I found that speech was taken away from me by an unknown force. I felt as if a mountain was weighing down on my breast, and was unable to make the very slightest sound. In the meantime, by the light of my night lamp, I saw the stranger enter my room through two doors, which were fast bolted. He came to me and said that by magic arts, which were all at his command, he had caused the lovely music to sound in order to awaken me, and that he now forced his way through all fastenings with the intention of offering me his hand and heart. My repugnance to his magic arts was, however, so great that I vouchsafed him no answer. He remained for a time standing without moving, apparently with the idea of waiting for a favorable decision. But as I continued to keep silence, he angrily declared he would revenge himself and find means to punish my pride, and left the room. I passed the night in the greatest disquietude, and only fell asleep towards morning. When I awoke, I hurried to my brother, but I did not find him in his room, and the attendants told me that he had ridden forth with a stranger to chase the daybreak. I at once suspected nothing good. I dressed myself quickly, ordered my palfrey to be saddled, and accompanied only by one servant, rode full gallop to the forest. The servant fell with his horse and could not follow me, for the horse had broken its foot. I pursued my way without halting, and in a few minutes I saw the stranger coming towards me with a beautiful stag, which he led by a cord. I asked him where he had left my brother, and how he had come by this stag, out of whose great eyes I saw tears flowing. Instead of answering me, he began to laugh loudly. I fell into a great rage at this, pulled out a pistol, and discharged it at the monster, but the ball rebounded from his breast and went into my horse's head. I fell to the ground, and the stranger muttered some words which deprived me of consciousness. When I came to my senses again, I found myself in this underground cave in a glass coffin. The magician appeared once again and said that he had changed my brother into a stag. My castle, with all that belonged to it, diminished in size by his arts, he had shut up in the other glass chest, and my people, who were all turned into smoke, he had confined in glass bottles. He told me that if I would now comply with his wish, it was an easy thing for him to put everything back in its former state, as he had nothing to do but open the vessels, and everything would return once more to its natural form. I answered him as little as I had done the first time. He vanished and left me in my prison, in which a deep sleep came on me. Amongst the visions which passed before my eyes, that was the most comforting, in which a young man came and set me free. And when I opened my eyes today, I saw thee and beheld my dream fulfilled. Help me to accomplish the other things which happened in those visions. The first is that we lift the glass chest in which my castle is enclosed onto that broad stone. As soon as the stone was laden, it began to rise up high with the maiden and the young tailor, and mounted through the opening of the ceiling into the upper hall, from whence they could easily reach the open air. Here the maiden opened the lid. And it was marvelous to behold how the castle, the houses, and the farm buildings, which were enclosed, stretched themselves and grew to their natural size with great rapidity, After this, the maiden and the tailor returned to the cave beneath the earth and had the vessels, which were filled with smoke, carried up by the stone. The maiden had scarcely opened the bottles when the blue smoke rushed out and changed itself into living men, in whom she recognized her servants and her people. Her joy was still more increased when her brother, who had killed the magician in form of a bull, came out of the forest towards them in his human form. And on that self-same day, the maiden, in accordance with her promise, gave her hand at the altar to the lucky tailor. My remix for this week, I've tried something different than the prior week. This one is called Glass Coffin Rebuttal, and it's from the point of view of the bad guy. Once upon a time, I totally got a bad rap. I mean, everyone puts their own spin on things, but how does a tailor get to be the protagonist in this story? Don't get me wrong, he is a nice guy. I think his name is Steve. I'm not really clear on that. Okay, so he is my brother-in-law, but I hardly saw him except for a few holidays in the beginning. I don't even think his clothes are all that well tailored. They're tight in the shoulders, and he can never make a cape for me that just flows correctly. Capes should swish around you and flow with your stride. That swish enhances a magician's natural handsomeness. Probably the easiest magic of them all, if you can find a decent tailor. As a magician, I travel a lot. The magician's life usually consists of rolling into a village, performing some minor magical illusions, and collecting money and food as payment, and heading off to the next village. I never considered settling down. I enjoyed the prestige of being a magician. The fine clothes, the adulation of the audience, free spirits at the local pub, and the lack of all that social responsibility of saying hello to people in the morning, having friends, or worse, supporting them when they need help. Who can even listen to another's problems is beyond me. Anyhow, that all changed when I met Florian. I performed in the village square. He was in the audience and asked me to his castle. He was fascinating. I couldn't be near him enough. And the interest was reciprocal. He loved magic and kept asking for more illusions. He also noticed the swish of my cape. You know someone is worth your time when they notice the important things. But his sister, well, she is a real authoritarian. She had this whole plan on how her and Florian would live together as rich barons of this small village and never marry and be together forever, yada, yada, yada. Possessive much? She didn't like it when Florian asked me to stay for a while, and she was extremely discourteous, accused me of all sorts of misdeeds, like taking away her voice, for example, or enchanting her with music. First off, she snores loudly. Florian confided in me he never got any rest because of it. You could hear her through stone walls. Stone walls. So a bit of magic and voila, no more snoring. And yes, at first it did make her mute, but I fixed the magic. And she could talk perfectly fine after that. And talk she did. I mean, if I had left her mute, the world would owe me a favor. And this rumor that I demanded her hand in marriage is pure poppycock. I mean, she chose a tailor as her hero. He just sews. Steve, the guy that sews. Sewing Steve. Steve who can't make a cape swish correctly. It is just her controlling the narrative, bending facts and spreading outright falsehoods. Now, Florian and I did take a trip. He was so refreshed after getting a few nights of great sleep. He wanted to explore, and he wanted me to go with him. But who was angry with the idea? Yes, the sister. She totally followed us. Here we were, a sunny glade, time feeling like it came to a standstill. Florian's beautiful eyes, my adorable and swishy cape. It was perfect. I think he was going to propose right then. And then she shot me. If it wasn't for the stylish and flowing cape I wore that day, she would have hit me too. I believe the movement of my cape distracted her eye, and before she could reload, Florian was there to disarm her. Such gallantry! But he had sympathy for someone who uses a gun on someone else. I was wide eyed with shock, but I let Florian be. You do you, that sort of thing. And after much discussion, they came up with the most ridiculous plan. Basically, if Florian and I were to marry, she wanted to marry someone too. Fine. She is a rich baroness and could pick anyone as a spouse. But she wanted quality. Someone noble and brave. And because of her high standards, there needed to be some sort of test. Why couldn't she just ask around and trust someone else's opinion? Because she liked power. There, I said it. It had to be her way. So here is when we get to this elaborate plot of shrinking her town and keeping her villagers as smoke in tiny glass bottles. She wanted to keep her power, see? And this was her plan, to lie asleep in a coffin until her true love freed her. A coffin? Why not a comfortable chaise or a bed? The drama just inflates her ego, I'm afraid. And why did Florian and I have to change into a stag and a bull? I do not know. I do know we fought in front of that inn at least 100 times. And yes, it was an inn, not some random hut. Her future spouse had to afford a nice inn. And after each of our mock battles, Florian would carry the poor soul off to the cave. Why a cave? Drama. Power. The whole affair had to be so mysterious. Words carved into the floor, a stone elevator, and hidden chamber. Not one of these potential spouses could figure out their right arm from their left. So I stepped in. Did I know I was helping Steve, who sews? No, but this whole affair was so very tiresome. Without the hints I spoke in that cave, I doubt he would have even gone into that dark tunnel at all. But in the end, Steve was excited, but the sister was even more jubilant. She knew Steve would need a steady hand. He is barely a tailor. He can make fabric into clothes. If you consider anything that covers your body clothes. Have I mentioned his inability at capes? It is so frustrating. And so the four of us were married, and it worked out, mostly. At least a few years. Florian and I had one side of the castle, and his sister and Steve had theirs. And then she starts all these rumors about me, and how evil I was. That her brother slayed an evil magician, that she was a victim and was saved by a brave tailor. She spread these lies like I wasn't even there. I think what really set her off was the death of her brother. It was sad. It couldn't be helped. He just grew so boring. He just talked about his feelings, his insecurities, his dreams. And here I am looking for a not Steve to make me a decent cape. Obviously, I have other, more important things on my mind. So I magicked him and made him walk off a ledge of the castle. There, his insecurities and hopes and dreams were solved. Not ideal, I admit, and it was messy. It was short-sighted. I am not perfect. I am a mere magician / extremely rich baron. But to back up, so when the rumors started to begin, I knew it was his sister. I knew the sympathy Florian felt for her. And so to make up for the whole ledge incident, I only wiped her and Steve's memories and made them live in the village like the lowly, boring people they are. Now that I think of it, maybe I did too good a job of wiping their memories. It might explain why Steve sews so badly. But the rumors persist, and false information always turns a mob against you. Now I rule alone, rich and alone, knowing that the people think of me as an evil magician is a heavy burden, but I do enjoy that his sister's happily ever after didn't come true. I can't even really remember her name. I sacrifice a lot for these people. I have to import my capes. That was the end of the story. So what I did, obviously, was try to tell it from the bad guy's point of view, and I tried to add some humor. So I hope it was funny. And I hope this helps you think outside the box when you're confronting these stories. You can take any little aspect of the story and make it your own, to write a whole new tale, to spin the tale in a whole new direction. So I really do like this as a writing prompt. It gets the creative juices flowing, and it's just kind of fun to let loose and kind of let your imagination run wild. And remember, if you want more of the original Grimm's fairy tales, they are on Project Gutenberg, and you can look that up online. Pick your favorites, write your own stories, and if you film it, please share it with BPL social media. Thank you. You notice someone is worth your time. You notice, you know someone is worth your time when they notice the important things. Okay, I think I did that wrong. And this rumor that I demanded, and here I'm looking for a not stave, not stave. So I really do like, if I could think of a word, I would tell you.